Hi, everyone. My name is Kamaria Kuling. I'm a master's student with the Delta E Plus research group at Simon Fraser University. I'd like to share my work on a project comparing two different methods of modeling energy storage, and I'm going to explain the motivation for the project, describe what the two different storage models look like, and go over a couple of the results. So let's start with the motivation. We're probably all pretty familiar with how important energy storage is to decarbonize our energy system. If we want a high penetration of renewables like wind and solar that have a high level of variability, we need energy storage to match that production up with demand. This means we also need reliable and well understood methods of including storage in our models. We need to understand the impact using different methods and models have on our model results in order to make informed decisions regarding energy use and climate change mitigation. Because of this, I set out to test these two storage modeling methods for their computational efficiency, results, and operation of storage. So now I'd like to go over what the difference between these methods are. The first, the Welsh version, has a structure that allows for intraday variability considerations in a long-term model, which also makes it more computationally complex. And then the other version, designed by NEAT, is more computationally efficient because it calculates the storage constraints only for each time slice. And for anyone not familiar, time slices provide the temporal resolution for the model. So they break the model into representative chunks of time where input parameters are constant. And to provide more context for these different storage models, I want to look at them in a bit more detail with a figure. So here we have a visual representation of these two models, the Welsh version in pink and the NEAT version in green. For both the NEAT and Welsh models, each time slice will have a total amount of stored energy charged or discharged. And then for the Welsh structure, these values are further subdivided from a time slice structure into a daily structure using seasons, day types, and daily time brackets. Though the Welsh model doesn't calculate the storage for each day in the model period, by subdividing the model this way, it provides an estimation of the daily variations in the storage system. So essentially, the most important differences are to remember that the NEAT structure calculates the storage for each time slice, and the Welsh structure estimates the daily cycle, giving it a higher resolution at the cost of a lower computational efficiency. So now to put these differences to the test, I created a simple energy system to run with the two different models. The figure here shows this energy system. So it just has wind and battery storage producing electricity to meet the energy demand, and the wind electricity also charges the storage. I made the cost of wind in the system very high and storage essentially free with an 80% efficiency. I then took the system and varied the amount of time slices and the maximum storage capacity to see how this affects the computation time and the operation of storage. So now I can show you some of the results. Starting with comparing the results for different maximum capacities. On this slide, you can see the results when there's a low maximum capacity and a high maximum capacity. The most obvious difference with these two graphs is that when there's a low maximum storage capacity, the two models diverge quite a bit more than with the high maximum capacity. It's important to note, though, that in both of these graphs, the different models reached the same optimal solution. So it appears that overall they are charging and discharging the same amount in the low maximum capacity case, just at different times. And in the low maximum capacity graph, there is a period in the middle where the lines do match up for a period. So it seems like in this period, the storage is needed to meet demand, but in the rest of the year, the storage isn't as crucial. And so it can take different paths without changing the optimal solution. So next, I'd like to show you how the two models impact computation time. As I said earlier, the NEAT version is more computationally efficient than the Welsh version because it isn't creating that daily variability. This graph is showing the number of times the NEAT model is faster than the Welsh model for different numbers of time slices. This graph goes from 365 time slices up to 8,760. And you can see that the difference in computation time increases rapidly with a higher number of time slices. So to put these numbers in more concrete terms, the NEAT model never took more than a number of seconds, with the 8,760 scenario taking about 30 seconds. And when there were very few time slices, the Welsh model performed similarly to the NEAT model. However, as the temporal resolution of the model increased, the Welsh version took much longer to run, going up to about 29.5 hours for the 8,760 scenario. So what this means is that if you don't need the daily storage considerations, it might make sense to go with the simplified neat version. But for a smaller number of time slices, or if computation time isn't as much of a concern, you might choose the Welsh version if you need more consideration of the intraday variability. So that was a quick overview of this project. As I expressed in my motivation, it's crucial to have a rigorous understanding of how our models affect results. So I hope this serves as a good reminder and motivates you not to take your modeling tools or model assumptions for granted, and take into account how these choices impact your results. So thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to answering your questions at the conference in June. And feel free to get in touch by email to learn more about this research. Thank you. Bye.
Welcome, this is Maren Ihlemann, and today I will present a case study on cross-border balancing capacity coordination in a system with high shares of renewables using the open source energy system model generator Spinopt. First of all, I would like to introduce the case study a little bit, looking at the different levels of coordination we took into consideration. First stage of coordination would be the coordinated activation of balancing energy, then the coordinated procurement of balancing capacity, and last but not least, the coordinated sizing of balancing capacity. And these latter two forms of coordination and the combination of those were the particular focus of this case study. So we compared the exchange scenario and the sharing scenario with the no coordination scenario. And we did this analysis for a day-ahead market with a joint clearing of the energy and the balancing capacity market, and performed this on a 2030 scenario for Central Western Europe. I've realized this case study using the open source energy system model generator Spinopt, which is open source, available on GitHub. It's implemented in Julia. For those interested, here's also the link to our online repository. Spinopt ships with a high level of technical detail that is required for this particular case study. So we use a clustered unit commitment formulation. We integrate ramping and reserve constraints. As the problem is rather computational intensive as a one-year mixed integer linear problem, we're using a rolling horizon optimization. And we realize those different market scenarios through the generic constraints within Spinopt and use data-driven differentiation between those market designs. So the results from our case study, when we compare the exchange of balancing capacity with the no coordination case, we do see a relaxation of the must-run requirements, particularly due to the import of spinning reserves. That allows us to have a more efficient day-ahead scheduling. We can operate those low flexibility, low operational cost units closer to their maximum output and avoid startups of high flexibility but also high operational cost units. And that all resulted in cost savings of the order of magnitude of 25 million euros per year. And this particular effect is also illustrated to the right-hand side here. In the upper graph, we see spinning reserves in France, which are in the no coordination case provided by a CCGT unit, while in the exchange case, those are replaced by exchanges from Belgium to France. And that also is reflected in the energy production in France. So in the no coordination case, we need to start up the CCGT solely to provide those spinning reserves, while in the exchange case, I kind of save the startup of these CCGTs and can, for instance, operate my nuclear power plants closer to their optimal. When we compare the balancing capacity sharing with the no coordination case, we do see even increased benefits compared to the exchange case, as we have a further relaxation of the technical constraints. Well, first of all, this is of course driven by the reduction of reserve requirements, as we're now sizing our reserves on a regional level rather than on a zonal level. And this is depicted here in the upper right graph. We do see that the amount of MFRR reserve product is reduced by far. And this allows us to have an even closer to the optimal scheduling of our energy portfolio. If we compare the portfolio deviation between the shared case and the no coordination case, we do see that the amount of expensive units is reduced. So the CCGTs, OCGTs, and the loss of load is dramatically reduced compared to the no coordination case, while cheaper units such as coal and nuclear and the storage can be used more efficiently. And that all results in moderate cost savings of about 155 million euros per year. But there is a question open whether the biggest benefit might not just be captured here yet. So if we look at those load duration curves of the CCGT and the OCGTs, the operating hours in the shared case are way lower, especially for the OCGTs, than in the no coordination case. And that kind of implies that we could potentially reduce the amount of high flexibility capacity, especially in combination with demand response, for example. And with that, I would like to say thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
How can TSO and DSO procure flexibility from distributed energy resources in an efficient and coordinated way while complying with regulation? Hi, my name is Leandro Lind. I'm a PhD student at the Comillas University in Madrid, and in this research reel, we will discuss the evaluation of TSO-DSO coordination schemes. More and more distributed energy resources such as distributed generation, storage systems, electric vehicles, and also demand response are being connected at medium and low voltage levels. While this may be a challenge for system operators, it is also an opportunity. DR will be able to offer flexibility in energy and ancillary service markets. But if both TSO and DSO want to procure this flexibility, they should coordinate the procurement and the activation to avoid creating congestions to one another. The literature around this topic is flourishing, and many coordination schemes have already been published. In this research reel, we focus on the economic and regulatory aspects of the evaluation of coordination schemes. In order to inform this analysis, we model 3 coordination schemes for a stylized European market sequence. So let's set the scene. First, a market operator runs a wholesale energy market, the day-ahead. This market does not consider the network. The market results are then sent to the system operator that checks the feasibility of the market clearing and, if necessary, runs a congestion management market, somewhere between the day-ahead and close to real-time. Finally, a balancing market is necessary, close to real-time, to compensate for deviations from forecasts of renewables or demand. The coordination schemes modeled in our research are the ones proposed by the Active System Management Report, written by ENSOE and the European DSO associations. In option 1, the DSO runs a local congestion management market. The results are then passed on to the TSO, which runs a central congestion management market and, after that, a balancing market. The option 2 consists of a combined congestion management market for transmission and distribution grids, in this case run by the TSO, and a balancing market following that. And in option 3, a single centralized balancing and congestion management market is cleared, in this case all by the TSO. The ancillary service markets, both balancing and congestion management, are modeled as DC optimal power flows. The data, as well as the basis for the mathematical formulation, are adapted from the work by Savropoulos et al. It includes a 5-node transmission grid and 2 18-node distribution grid. During the 24 hours considered, constraints appear at both distribution and transmission grids. The economic results show that the option 3, in which the TSO optimizes both services for the whole network at the same time, is the cheapest in the short term. We also observe that in option 2, when congestion management and balancing markets are split, efficiency is lost, as flexibility providers are activated in opposite directions, which doesn't happen in option 3. On the long-term economic effects, We look at the scenario in which the constrained distribution line is reinforced. Considering regulatory prices and parameters in Spain, we conclude that for more efficient coordination schemes, options 1 and 3, the use of flexibility is more beneficial than the reinforcement of the line, depending on the amount of constrained days during the year. And one final conclusion is that by reinforcing the distribution grid, DR located downstream the congestion can then participate in other upstream markets, such as balancing. This means that the long-term economic evaluation should also consider the benefits from reinforcements unlocking higher liquidity in upstream markets. Finally, our research also offers a regulatory counterpoint to the economic evaluation. Option 3, for instance, is the most efficient from an economic perspective, but may be less aligned with the European regulation, as DSOs may have a less active role depending on the market setting. The national TSO-DSO landscape should also be considered. In Europe, certain countries have only one DSO, while in others, hundreds exist. Also, it is common for a 2 DSO layer to be in place, meaning that a local DSO connects to a regional DSO that finally connects to the TSO, increasing the complexity for coordination schemes with more markets such as option 1. Thank you for your interest and for watching this research review. We invite you to check out our paper submitted to the first International Association for Energy Economics online conference.
Hello, my name is Olivia Fernandes and I'm an energy student in University of São Paulo. And my paper is improvement in the systematic of oil and gas action, make economically viable onshore small fields, and increase gas transport capacity in Brazil. Summary and introduction. The discoveries of shale gas were a revolution not only for the oil and gas industry, but for the production and generation of energy. The discoveries of shale gas reserves have favored the growth of several countries worldwide. The United States, for example, have moved from a gas import to a gas export, which is a very important factor for a country's energy security. Regulatory change and government incentives were crucial for countries such as the US, which have become a world leader in the natural gas market. Lessons can be learned from this experience to favor other countries. And my object is a proposed improvement in bid from onshore oil and gas fields with a focus on onshore shale gas fields in Brazil in conjunction with public calls for the construction of new gas pipeline. In 2019, the US produced 33.6 BCF of natural gas and 25.5 BCF of which was on shale gas. According to Sandbeck et al., this large production is mostly due to U.S. regulatory policy that mandates proper law, while the particular of states law vary across the U.S. rights to oil and gas extract from the grower is generally held by the surface line. Rights to oil and gas can also be split from each other, and so can rights to produce from different streets below the property. And current U.S. federal policy encourages domestic production of oil and gas, and this policy has been implemented in multiple was include these 3 points. Overview of shale gas regulation Brazil. Brazil, its mineral resources include tools in the underground, uncontrolled government access by law. Thus, the federal government, through the Oil and Gas National Regulatory Agency, ANP, organize bids rounds that give the right to explore and produce oil and gas. The juridical frame established in Brazil makes oil and gas IP activities less attractive to investors and compare it to US model. Uh, Once it requires more bureaucratic steps to be overcome. In US, FERC has jurisdiction of the operation of interstate natural gas pipelines under the Natural Gas Act and the Natural Gas Policy Act. FERC requires interstate natural gas pipelines to provide non-discriminatory open access to their pipeline system, so the pipelines must subscribe to existing uncontracted capacity to storm the aircraft worth. The pipeline network US has about 3 million miles of mainline and other secondary pipelines that link natural gas production areas and storage facilities with consumers. To date, Brazil has only 28,000 millions of mainline, which is a small network area that prevents the growth of the gas sector in the country. However, the new Brazilian gas law that authorizes the regulation of natural gas transportation should encourage the construction of new gas pipelines and thus create new incentives to IP investments. My proposal aims to enable two concepts of new onshore small fields as well as the construction of new gas pipelines. Articles propose that the bind rounds organized by the regulatory agency (NMP) should be carried out in conjunction with public calls for new transportation pipelines. Thus, in order to make gas production economically feasible, especially for onshore shale gas fields, and to increase the amount of gas available for new pipeline projects. A unique by system is involved the rights of exploring shale gas fields and profiting from the construction of new pipelines can be beneficial to the country according to interview carried out with prospective investors. Uh, One of problems faced in infant energy infrastructure networks is the unbalance between AP activities and the capacity to transport the output. Joint bids for IP of shale gas associated with the construction of pipeline can draw possible synergies, reducing risks and thus make the action more attractive to potential investors. In this way, investors that will explore and produce natural gas will be guaranteed that the production will be fully transported to its final destination. In the same way, investors of the new gas pipeline will count with natural gas to be transported and thus traded. Naturally, detailed regulation will be needed to support joint accounts, and this new regulation can be addressed with regard to the principle of social and environmental governance that guides the liberation of local regulatory agents. This reference and thank you for your attention.
The main finding of this poster is to show that an increase in the expectations of renewable energy generation reduces supply elasticity and increases price variations. Conversely, an increase in demand expectations increases supply elasticity and decreases price variations. While doing this, the expected demand contains potential shocks in prices, while renewable accelerates those potential shocks through a change in supply elasticity. The characteristics of the electricity market have increased the volatility of electricity prices, in particular, the lack of large-scale storage, which forces supply always to be equal to demand and makes the price of electricity more vulnerable to any shock. As a result, more price variations represent a higher risk for market participants, since nobody likes to face the uncertainty of a price that one day is very high and the next very low. My research explores how renewable production and demand expectations impact supply elasticity and in turn price volatility. Previous literature has identified the system intermittency and the merit order effect as two channels through which renewable affect price variations. My research adds elasticity as a new channel. The methodology that I follow computes hourly supply elasticities for the German-Austrian region between the years 2011 and 2018. To understand this, we must remember that the market supply curve follows a merit order. This means that the cheapest energies provide electricity first. As you can see in the graph starting from the middle, the cheapest sources are usually renewables with a zero marginal cost, followed by nuclear producers with also a very small marginal cost. And finally, these are followed by conventional or peak sources such as coal, gas, and oil, which are expensive because of their fuel prices. Finally, in the first part of the curve, negative prices emerge. This zone happens because of the inflexible firms behavior, which are mainly composed by nuclear and coal fuel plants with high restarting cost. So when they are competing with renewables, they prefer to make negative offers because turning on and off their production is more expensive than losing these negative units. By plotting the auction data, we distinguish an inverted S-shaped curve. From this, I can identify three main elasticities: the one in the left for inflexible producers, the one in the middle for renewable and nuclear, and the one in the right for peak producers. However, because the elasticity is defined as the additional amount that producers are willing or able to produce for a given change in price, I will not consider the elasticity in the middle because renewables cannot be controlled as they depend on weather conditions. Therefore, I only compute the elasticities for inflexible and peak producers. Next, I estimate the impact of renewable expected production and demand on the elasticities using the following fixed effect model, controlling by individual hourly characteristics and seasonality. My hypothesis is that, given the merit order, an increase in renewable energy decreases the chances to sell electricity for peak and inflexible producers, which translates in a more inelastic supply. On the other hand, an increase in expected demand increases the chances to sell electricity for both types of producers, and this translates in a more elastic supply. Then I compute the daily realized variance of price returns and apply a fixed effect model to estimate the impact of those two elasticities on realized variance. In this case, my hypothesis is that an increase in elasticity decreases price variations because a bigger production capacity contains in a better way potential price shocks. The results confirm my hypothesis. I find that the relationship between renewables and both elasticities is negative and statistically significant, while the expected demand has a positive and statistically significant relationship. Also, the inflexible elasticity is more responsive to changes in both independent variables than for peak elasticity. Additionally, I found that a 1% increase in both elasticities decreases realized volatility. So to conclude, we can say that despite all the benefits of renewable energy production, it can also be detrimental to market efficiency by increasing the price risk of market participants. It is therefore important to continue researching all the implications of renewable energy generation and to continue exploring the various mechanisms that allow market flexibility. On the other hand, demand expectations have the inverse effect as they help to adjust production in advance and absorb a price shock by making the supply more elastic. Moreover, understanding the shape of the supply curve and the factors that change this shape is crucial given their policy and investment implications. Finally, I invite you to scan the following QR code where you can have detailed information about this poster and my current research. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Kheireddine Sari and I am second year PhD student at University of Montpellier. I also work as a wind energy developer at AO Green. Thank you for this opportunity for sharing my research. Today's topic is about wind intermittency reduction. My research goal is to find locations where we can produce electricity in a complementary way. For example, we have location A and location B. When the wind blows in location A, it doesn't in location B. And when the wind blows in location B, it doesn't in location A. So this way, it's better to install wind turbines in both locations. And then it will allow us to reduce intermittency and also produce electricity in a more balanced way. So rather than only considering technological solutions which will increase energy system costs according to growth of installed capacities, we'd rather propose here planning solutions since it doesn't require tangible investment. Wind intermittency ought to decrease with a larger scale. In this study, we noticed that in Bavaria, electricity production is volatile. This volatility decreases, according to larger geographical scale. This is due mainly to the presence of different weather regimes. Which brings us to the next point. In this meteorological study, installed capacities here are labeled by weather regimes. Here, the blue ones are complementary to the red ones, and the authors compared business as usual scenarios and proposed a balanced planning which allows to reduce difference between electricity offer and demand, hence future additional investments as battery systems and thermal power plants. Which brings us to our research questions. Is there complementary wind locations in France? To do so, we collected hourly wind speed data from 2016 until 2018 for 420 stations, but we only took the most productive one, that is 36. Then we used two methods. First, we considered a feature-based classifier, which allows us to translate a time series as one entity instead of several thousand points. And second, on the other hand, we used instant-based classifiers, which measures difference of time series and cluster them according to their shape. The result part. Here, we extracted more than 20 variables and performed Pearson correlation tests that avoid redundancies. These two axes represent 68% of the cloud variation, but as we can see here, the projected variables are not how we expected them to be, since, as we can see here, the projected efficiency in winter and in summer are positively correlated, which means that the sites that produce well in winter are the same that produce well in summer. So here the classification, we have three main clusters, and the third one is the one where there is the most productive sites. And this result doesn't serve the purpose of our research. So here comes the second part of the results. Here the methodology used was dynamic time warping, but I had to expand the time step to weekly average because it is demanding in calculation capacities, especially for time series of 27,000 hourly observation. Despite the greater granularity, nevertheless, it gave interesting results since we have 6 clusters according to their shape. Data here was also standardized to grasp variability of the series, and we can see that there is some complementary shapes between the second and third cluster and the fourth and the fifth cluster. To verify it, we chose few individuals of the second and third cluster, but also the fourth and the fifth cluster. And here we can see that there is overlapping in different times of the year and for both clusters. In summary, to reduce intermittency, we would like to explore other ways than the ecological solutions, which are rather costly. So here, to pinpoint these complementary locations, we considered 2 methods in order to identify these sites. Feature-based classifiers, but it did not cluster wind time series according to their wind complementarity, but rather on their characteristics, which is not here our purpose. It is useful for pluridisciplinary time series, but it is limited on time series with similar structure as our own. And there was instant-based classification, which allowed us to put a better classification of the wind time series and to pinpoint complementary wind locations. Even if it is a meteorological topic, a statistician now is able to identify them thanks to dynamic time warping. Weekly frequencies is convenient to actual calculations capacity, but doesn't really allow us to determine with enough accuracy complementary wind size and reduce wind intermittency. But my next efforts will be oriented toward more stations and smaller time steps, because electricity is the instantaneous energy flow that we have to be balanced each 30 minutes at least. So that's it. Thank you for listening and have a nice day. Merci de votre attention.